Welcome back. You're watching Political Exchange, where we continue our discussion on Kenya's upcoming elections and the possible impact of macroeconomic stability. Nicole, before the break, we were talking about young people. The Kenyan population, is very youthful. They play an important role in the country's political and economic life. To what extent are they used as a social force in the kind of political campaigning of the various candidates, and how does that feed into the fears around possible outbreaks of violence?
Well, I really do think that someone like Martha Karua is ahead of the curve. She's really trying to mobilize the youth. She's advocating youth issues, whereas most of the more established candidates, such as Raila Odinga, Mwai Kibaki, although he won't stand in this election, as well as Uhuru Kenyatta and the other gentleman, William Ruto, they haven't really been able to mobilize the youth vote as such. They're more standing on a political ethnicity type vote, which we don't believe that the youth in Kenya is receptive to. The youth in Kenya, as we understand, is less likely to be motivated by ethnicity in terms of voting patterns, which means that this could be a potential game changer in the elections if the youth come out in force really to vote.
Dr. McPhee, let me bring you in here. Young people are, of course, always the kind of motive force for change in many societies. Kenyan young people are very well organized. They are of an internet generation, but they're also largely unemployed. How important is this youth component, and are they likely to bring a new dynamic in the potential outcome of the upcoming elections?
Well, I think there's an immediate problem, because one of the things is that a lot of young people, first of all, they find it quite difficult to get an identity card in Kenya. Now, a lot of those people are not yet registered as voters. So although we're talking about numerically a very large number of people, many of those people are unable right at the moment to actually vote. And whether this voter registration is going to take place at the rate that it should take place to enable those people to vote in early March next year, this is always, I think, a real question for us. The logistics is quite difficult, and I know that Kenyans tend to leave things to the last moment, but I think a lot of those young people at the moment, they will not be able to vote. And this is why I think some of the more, let's say, mature politicians like William Ruto, like Uhuru Kenyatta, they're sort of as it were, gaining their support from people who are slightly older. The unemployment problem, of course, is there. Many of the people in the rural areas, you must remember, don't suffer unemployment too badly because of the fact that, there's always things to do out in the countryside. However, those people will probably be swayed more easily by the money that can flow in the election, and also by false promises made by more senior politicians, in my mind.
Nicole, let me bring you in here. Who are the front runners? This is a big race. Lots of candidates are coming up. But of course, we know not all of them stand the chance and will resonate with voters. To your mind, who are the front runners? Who are we likely to see contesting and emerging as potential victors?
Well, from my understanding and from a number of polls that I've seen recently, up till about May this year, it seems that Raila Odinga is still quite substantially in the lead, by about 10 to 20 percentage points. He's in the opinion polls, he's standing head and shoulders, some might say, above the other candidates. Second to him would be Uhuru Kenyatta. Thirdly, it would be William Ruto. And fourth place generally goes to either Mudavadi or Martha Karua. But there's currently a High Court judgment that we're awaiting to see whether or not these candidates are eligible to run in the elections due to things such as corruption and the ICC prosecutions. This court case started just with William Ruto and Uhuru Kenyatta being brought to the courts by a number of electoral activists. So they're challenging it along Section 6 of the Constitution to say that legitimately they should not be allowed to stand in the elections because they don't make the kind of baseline necessity for kind of political legitimacy in terms of them still standing for the ICC prosecutions.
Dr. McPhee, if the court ruling, cancels out some of the candidates, particularly, for example, Mr. Kenyatta, is it likely to have a backlash? And, how will supporters of Mr. Kenyatta take to the idea that their candidate would be ineligible to, in fact, contest the elections?
Well, it would be very, very hard to tell. Although the polls actually indicate that Raila Odinga is the favourite at the moment, I know that there's a very, very substantial proportion of the country that simply will not allow him to be elected as the next president of Kenya. And possibly that would prevent him from actually becoming the president. So although from the polls you would clearly say that he is the favourite, to my mind, there's very little possibility of Raila Odinga actually becoming the president of Kenya, the next president of Kenya. Now that means, you see, that if, for example, Uhuru Kenyatta and Ruto are ruled out, possibly Mudavadi is then going to be the future president. This has been spoken about even about a year ago. People were talking about the possibility of Mr. Mudavadi actually coming forward. People, however, from the Rift Valley are a little bit suspicious of him. The party that he has actually formed was registered by a lady in State House, and this has now been a bit of a negative vibe, as it were, in the Rift Valley. But if Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto are unable to stand because of these cases against them, I think then it's going to be a head-to-head between Raila Odinga and also Mudavadi, and probably Mudavadi will come out the winner.
Nicole, let me bring in the question of the supporters of these candidates, of course. We know that ethnic rivalries played a large part in the violence that we saw in post the elections in 2008. To what extent is any one candidate able to unite Kenyans beyond ethnicity?
Well, I would say that Martha Karua is really trying to stand on a platform where she is a Kenyan rather than standing on a geopolitical or ethnic platform. And I actually had wanted to say about that court case, there's been talk in the last few days that possibly Odinga and Mudavadi and Musyoka, who's another candidate, might be included in this court case, in this integrity court case, due to concerns about corruption, with a number of large corruption incidents that have happened since about 2002 to 2010. So in the event that all of those candidates are disqualified from running due to this integrity trial, I think Martha Karua might be a good compromise candidate.
Dr. McPhee, do you agree with Nicole?
I would agree entirely with that, actually. Certainly, if the front runners, as they are now, are ruled out, I think Martha Karua then has a very, very good chance. One of the biggest problems, I think, with her is that a lot of men in Kenya will find it very, very difficult to accept a woman president. But we've had precedents in Africa, and certainly if those people were ruled out, she would be a very, very strong candidate, I think. And since she's a former student of mine, I'd be very, very happy to support her as well.
If she emerges as a someone with real potential and a possible winner, how is she likely to go down in the investment and business community in Kenya?
I think the business community would welcome her with open arms. I think she's a doer. I think she gets things done. She's very popular in the business community. People realize that she's got a much greater vision than any man in this country. The vision of any man in this country is, where am I going to be and what will I be able to do? The vision is not, what is Kenya going to be able to do? Although we may speak about even Vision 2030, the fact is all of our politicians are not thinking about the future, when we're not really putting in place structures which is then going to make us, which are going to make us a competitive country. When we compare ourselves with India, with China, with Malaysia and all of those countries, we're very uncompetitive. But she, in fact, would be a person who would, I think, put a lot of the men in place so that we can actually see to much better times from an economic point of view.
Nicole, the prospects of another female president on the African continent, surely that must be something that we should be celebrating and be looking forward to.
I would definitely agree. From what we've seen from Ellen Johnson Sirleaf and also Joyce Banda in Malawi, it's been very positive thus far. And I think hopefully the perceptions will change along the continent with regards to female presidents, since these two presidents have been so strong. Even though Joyce Banda came in relatively recently, I think about 3 months ago, she's made some significant changes and has put Malawi back on track after the sort of unfortunate economic policies of Mutharika.
But if Kenya is poised to have a woman president, does this necessarily mean a better life for women in Kenya? Because we often see that the mere election of women to positions of power doesn't automatically lead to the upliftment of women in general.
That's definitely true, and that would be a concern, and it's hard to say either way. But Martha Karua has been a prominent activist for women's rights in Kenya. She's also a prominent human rights activist, having gotten a number of accolades since the early 1990s.
Well, that's where we will have to leave it for now. We were talking risk in Kenya with Nicole Beardsworth in the studio and Dr. Jim McPhee in Nairobi.